All right. Welcome in, everybody, to Dynasty Junkies, episode 173. I'm your host, Tommy at FF Tommy B. I am joined by my co-host, Rocky Petrella. How you doing today, Rock?
Doing pretty good. Been a while since I've been here. I think I've missed the last couple shows, but happy to be back. Happy to be. I've potted with you multiple times before, but the first time officially as Junkies host with you here. So I'm happy to finally get that out of the way tonight.
Yeah, let's throw up our first DAP Network.
There we
DAP.
go.
And we brought in a ringer, Rocky. We've got the one and only Neil Dutton. How you doing today, Neil?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for asking me to come on. I say my seasonal debut, first time obviously speaking with you fine fellows, and first time anyone's asked me to flap my gums and send forth my horrible monotone Scouse accent for everyone's listening pleasure this year. So very happy to be here.
Yeah, why don't you tell the listeners sort of where they can find you, what you do, because you're in all sorts of places, aren't you?
Yes, I'm one of those things that, once you notice me, you can't fail to notice me everywhere. I'm, that horrible chair in someone's living room that, you really want. Who wants to sit on that even? But they all seem to have it. I'm a fancy football scribbler for such sites as Rotaviz. I've been there for quite some time. I also write for 4 for 4. I usually do a lot of off-season work for them, but in season I write matchup blurbs for several teams. I've contributed to Player Profiler, so Roto Underworld, for quite some time. And in the UK, which in case you can't tell from the accent, that's where I'm from, I also contribute to Gridiron Magazine, which is like the best-selling UK-based Gridiron magazine. And you can follow me on the Twitter. I will never call it X. At Endulton13.
As you shouldn't. The UK, I had no idea, Neil. No idea.
I forgot to put the top hat monocle on.
Yeah. I thought maybe you were from Alabama or something. I don't
know. And you're an Eagles fan too, aren't you, Neil?
I am indeed, yes. I was allocated the Eagles by my friend when I first started watching. He thought it'd be better if I had a team rather than just my pleas. I'll just be a fan of the sport. He said, no, you need a team. You need to enjoy their successes and bemoan their failings. And he knew all about failing because he was a Jets fan. But he thought it'd be a good idea to give me the Eagles. So I think I won that one.
Yes, you definitely did, Neil. I'm also an Eagles fan. I got my Eagles hat on right now.
Oh, jeez.
Surrounded by Eagles fans.
Let's get into it, guys. Jason Kelce's retired. He's done. What are y'all's thoughts?
Too upsetting. Sorry, I'm not talking about this.
And especially if you heard that retirement speech, he was pretty emotional. He I think stopped to cry 10 times during that thing.
If Jason Kelce can cry, anyone can cry. So it was acceptable to watch it. It says something that it would take a city like Philadelphia to embrace and love a 6th round center, but just the man just became the heartbeat of the team, and especially it's been weird. He wasn't the Jason Kelce he is now. Initially, he was a serviceable center in a long line of serviceable centers that the Eagles have had since the dawn of the 21st century. But then all of a sudden, something just kicked in. The radioactive spider bit him, and he became, the heartbeat of the team, the emotional leader of the pack, as it were. And it's a huge loss from on the field and off the field because, no one wants to be the guy who follows the legend. You want to be the guy who follows the guy that failed. But obviously, I don't want anyone to come into the Eagles like Cam Jurgens, probably the next man up. I don't want him to suck just because he's not Jason Kelce, but the chances are he probably will to an extent. So it's only like the Packers who can replace Hall of Fame talent with Hall of Fame talent at a certain position. So it would be very unlikely the Eagles get another Jason Kelce to replace him so quickly.
Yeah, and to your point about how he became he's been a 6-time All-Pro, I think, and all of those were in the last 7 years or something like that. At the start of his career, he was not Jason Kelce, and he's going out on top. It's kind of amazing how good he still was. I think he's 36. I think he is now. So yeah, it's a big loss from a football/fantasy perspective. Like I mentioned this on Trade Addicts earlier this week. The biggest thing to me is the tush push still going to work? Because Jalen Hurts got a lot of points from fantasy points from that tush push. Maybe he just runs it in anyway, rather than sneaks it or throws some passing touchdowns. But it'll be interesting to see how much they utilize that now and if it's still as effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I think kind of gets missed is the fact that even if the tush push doesn't work, they can still throw the football. They can still run it.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Maybe he just throws more touchdowns now instead of runs for 15, 16 because he gets like 9 goal line touchdowns from the tush push. Yeah,
exactly. And if he falls back to league average, I still think Jalen Hurts is a top 5 potential scoring quarterback coming into 2024. Any objections from the Eagles fans on that point?
No, I'd say it'd be nice if they could go back to a more, I want to be polite, more grown up offense than just the rugby play that what it looks like. I'm not going into the whole, it should be banned. It's not a football play. It couldn't be more of a football play when you dial it down and break it to the bare bones. But from a fantasy point of view, it'd be nice if we didn't put Jalen Hurts in the worst possible position to get a kick. And quite frankly, if any possible running play, that's the worst one. And obviously it's a high value one. They've executed at high level. But the fact that it just became a crutch, almost, it was like, it works, so we'll do it. It's like, yeah, but why not do something else? Show some creativity. So if, Jalen Hurts wasn't great as a runner last year, certainly not in the design runs. They weren't very well designed. They weren't very well executed. Maybe Kellen Moore can come in and liven that up a bit. But it's the fact that Nick Sirianni keeps going out and saying, yes, this partnership that we have, it's not a partnership, Nick. It's not yours anymore. Leave it alone. Let someone else do it now.
Yeah, and Hurts, to the point on Hurts, he's in what was a bit of a regression last year and a down year compared to the previous year. I just was looking it up. It was QB2 in points per game last year in fantasy points.
A disaster.
So I mean, and there's definitely, I think, room for him to get back where he was in 2022. A lot of things went to hell in the second half of last year, as you know, if you're an Eagles fan. And the offense was part of that. I think some of it was Brian Johnson. Some of it was Nick Sirianni. Like Neil said, hopefully Kellen Moore helps shake things up a little bit, do things a little differently. And this may sound counterintuitive, but I think getting more going with the running game actually could help. They kind of, I think, in that second half of the season, really kind of abandoned the non-Hurts running game to a large extent. It'll be interesting to see who ends up there, because Swift, I believe, is a free agent, and I've been hearing one of the big, longtime beat reporters here, Howard Eskin, has been circulating that he's hearing Saquon, that there's interest in Saquon, which surprises me because they don't usually invest a lot in running back, but Saquon would be very interesting, and I think would help the offense as a whole, having that kind of threat in the backfield.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these impending free agents. T. Higgins and Michael Pittman were tagged, but none of the running backs were. And so it feels like a pretty wide open free agency class. Do y'all have any predictions of where you'd like to see some of these free agents go, or where you think they might go? Neil, why don't you kick us off there?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I've been, hoping for, but it seems that the sources, and sources, we don't know what that means at this time of year. That could be someone's friend, someone's brother, someone who hasn't got a clue. People just call themselves sources this time of year. Was Saquon to the Texans, as it just felt that, their running backs were league average at best. I mean, we all love Devin Singletary. It's been a wonderful story that this guy literally spends all his time on a roster, and then eventually December kicks in, and that's when the teams go, just give them the damn ball. The other guy doesn't work. So the idea of actually putting someone a bit more dynamic, like Saquon, in the backfield with CJ Stroud, would open up all types of things, not just for those two, but also for Nico Collins, for Tank Dell, assuming he comes back healthy, and now Dalton Schultz. But it just seems that for some reason that might not be the popular choice well, it is the popular choice, but it's not the popular choice within the Houston organization. So obviously, they just hate fun.
What do you think about that, Rocky?
Yeah, I definitely think the Texans are probably going to get one of these free agent running backs. And this class is insane. It's like the most. I think the most high end running backs we've ever seen at one time on the free agent market. It seems like. I mean, there's Saquon, Henry, Pollard. I'm drawing a blank now, but I know there's many more. Jacobs and more beyond that. So it's going to be nuts. I think that I think Dallas probably signs one. I can see Jerry Jones doing that. I don't know what their cap situation is, but I'm sure at least one of these guys you could get on a cheaper contract, even if you need to. And another spot that I kind of like is, this is very dependent on the quarterback situation. It doesn't look like Cousins is coming back to Minnesota, but if they sign a competent quarterback and then they have Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson, I love a running back going there. I had recently thrown out the idea of possibly Saquon sort of filling a Dalvin Cook role there, which I would have loved. I like that better if it's Cousins because I think he's the best of the available guys out there. But it's sounding more and more like he might be going to somewhere else like Atlanta. But if they have if they end up with garbage at quarterback, it's not as interesting. But obviously they just released Madison. But with all the talent surrounding there, I mean, that could be a really dynamic offense if they stick one of these running backs in there.
I've heard a lot of Saquon to the Chargers, and that makes a ton of sense to me. If that happens, a dark horse destination for Austin Eckler for me would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. Travis Etienne has admitted that he gets nervous when the ball is thrown his way. He looks like a pass-catching running back, but he does not act like one. And that offense wants to throw the ball 650 times. I would love to see what a real pass catcher would do in the backfield there. And I haven't really heard anybody talk about that. Neil, have you heard anything around Austin Eckler?
The one that's Eckler's another one of those players that seems to be getting attached to the Eagles. Because again, the Eagles are not going to look for a running back that they're going to carry the ball 300 times. But someone who's going to come in and be, a change of pace back, probably get some receiving work. Obviously, he has the familiarity with Kellen Moore from Los Angeles last year. Wasn't a vintage season for Eckler, so it's not as if we're going to be reuniting a dream team, which is obviously a dirty phrase in Philadelphia. But somewhere like that, maybe the Chiefs, just somewhere that he's not going to be the guy, but he'll have enough of a role, especially if he's used as the primary passing down work.
Yeah, I like that. One guy that got kicked to the curb is Russ Wilson. And I heard a rumor today that he was meeting with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And although he wasn't great last year, I kind of like that fit. I think that there could be something there because if you look at all the underlying metrics for Russ last year, he wasn't as bad as the tenor on Twitter really suggests. The hidden metrics are just saying he was kind of a league average quarterback. And I think with those pass catching options in Pittsburgh, you could go pretty far with a Russ Wilson. I could see them really contending for a playoff spot, but nobody seems to think that way. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Rocky? Are you entirely out on Russ as the acquire the cheap quarterback guy? Hey, you're on mute, man.
Sorry about that. I had to yell at my kid for a second. But no, I'm not out on Russ as the cheap quarterback guy. I like you said, I mean, he was league average. I think he had like 25, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, something like that, on a bad Broncos team. And he was still producing decently enough. He doesn't have the upside. I kind of like to sometimes find those cheap guys with upside, which is what Kirk Cousins was for years, because he'd be valued like a QB2 and he'd score like a QB1. I'm not sure Russ is going to score like a QB1, but I like it. I love the Pittsburgh thing, and I would feel the same way I'd say Russ would end up in Atlanta. I love it for the weapons, because to me the upgrade just to competency at those two locations would be just such a big deal because I mean Ritter and Pickett were so bad, and so just to have competent quarterbacking there, I think would help a lot. I guess the one worry in Pittsburgh would be Arthur Smith, but there's not much we can do about that.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Neil? Do you have a preferred destination for Russ? Do you think he's wash? Where are you at with him?
I just think that anywhere he goes, if he's not the starter, he would be a terrible choice to be a bridge/mentor. Because could you imagine being mentored by Russell Wilson? Oh, God, it'd be, please stop the inspirational quotes and just speak like a human being. The thing about Pittsburgh is that we saw last year that Wilson was hidden to a large extent in the offense by Sean Payton. You know, the Broncos were like literally, don't do anything, throw when you have to. But we know you're here. We just don't want you here. Well, if there's an offensive coordinator who doesn't want his quarterback to do anything, it's Arthur Smith. So we're thinking it's a similar situation. But look, we want to run the ball. We've got decent talent, but we don't want you to throw them. Just get the ball out if you can, and just do it. Just shut up and do it. So you'd like to think Wilson maybe was a better option than Mason Rudolph or Kenny Pickett. But then you actually look and think, based on the last 2.5 years, is he? Yeah, and I never thought I'd be in that position. And quite frankly, I've just been sick in my mouth saying it. But I genuinely I can't imagine him going anywhere and unlocking anyone for fancy purposes. And he might be efficient, but I think he ran very hot last year in terms of like touchdowns. And that was where he got the bulk of his fantasy production. It's risky to bank on that, especially in an Arthur Smith Steelers offense. So I'm not sure I can think of anywhere better. So in terms of sheer, oh God, this is a beautiful car crash waiting to happen, it would be must-watch telly. But in terms of, I want to get so much of this on my fantasy team, I really don't think it's going to be that type of situation.
The good news is if you do suffer an injury week 1, week 2, whatever, or if you're thin at the quarterback position, the acquisition cost is just so dang low that you don't really have to worry about the worst case outcome. Like, okay, I lose a second and a third round in value and I took a risk. Like, okay, whatever. That doesn't really sink your team. If it does, you never really were a contender anyway. Any other veterans on your minds? Any other free agents that you want to talk about before we move on to the combine?
I don't think so.
Great. So yeah, like I said, we had the combine and we have a new fastest 40 time. That was the real highlight for me. But what I want to do, instead of talking about the individual players, I want to talk to you, Neil, about what you take away from the combine. How does this affect your process as a fantasy manager? Are you somebody that really finds signal in these different Underwear Olympics metrics? Is this something that you completely ignore? How do you approach the combine?
It's a nice thing to see. It's a chance to get, it's a non-football event. Let's be honest. Unless they're doing the gauntlet, they very rarely see a football during their time there, especially the receivers. So it can be nice to give someone a bit of a boost. Like if we know someone is a good player based on their college production, a strong showing at the combine can just be something to just, tick off and boost them up a level or whatnot. I think we all knew Xavier Worthy was fast. So this hasn't all of a sudden been, oh my God, how fast was he? And he can catch. Look at his stats. We know he's fast. The stats are good. It's basically just been a confirmation. So it's not if anyone went in thinking he was going to be slow, well, they're going to be pleasantly surprised and they'll rank him higher. If that was the case, I don't think they're a serious fantasy football fan because we knew he was going to be fast. Everyone has said that. So it can be good in that way to just confirm prize. An awful lot of it it's hard to know because, we like to play, landing spot games, especially with, rookies where there's no prize at all, where they've never been with these people. There's no connections unless there's old college coaches. But the problem is that the question they get is, and what teams have you talked to? Well, I can answer that question from now until the end of time. All of them. The players talk to all the teams. So we don't get any clear signal from that either. So it's not I don't think it's a complete waste of time. I just think it's a small factor to be weighed in along with all the other factors that we should consider as we go along the journey towards the draft.
Yeah, what do you think, Rocky?
Yeah, I mostly agree with Neil. I don't put much stock in the combine at all, actually, mainly because the most important thing about the combine to me is just how it affects draft capital, and I'll find that out in a couple months. So it'll factor in there to the NFL people, and as we all know, draft capital affects a lot in terms of what you can expect from a fantasy player, what kind of opportunity they're going to get, and things like that. So that's the only real significance for me. The only other thing slightly for me is and I haven't really gone through and seen what they've all done, but how tight ends, it matters a little bit for me, just because athleticism is so important at that position, just based on past history and what we've seen, that even sometimes guys who are not highly touted coming out, if they have a really good athletic profile, sometimes that like Kittle, I think, was a 5th rounder or something, but was athletic, that kind of thing. So that's the only thing I really care about, is the tight ends in the combine, and then just to see how it affects draft capital.
Yeah, I like to keep track of where the tiers are extending or compressing. I feel like there's a lot of confidence in dynasty fantasy football this time of year, and a lot of it is unfounded. So if there's a perceived expansion of a tier and one of my picks all of a sudden has a little bit more value, I'm more inclined to move off of it right now. Just sell confidence right now, because we shouldn't have any in just about any of these rookies or any of these draft picks. I love the concept of liquidity, but having rookie draft picks as a trade asset requires trade partners, right? So strike while the iron is hot. Don't worry about now and whenever your draft is, April, May, June. If you can find somebody who's really hot and bothered about the 207 because they think that there's some tier over there, go for it. Sell the pick, right? Go get some wide receiver or running back that has a history of production that you believe in more than a random pick. That's all I take from the combine. And I know that's not very fun, because this is the time of year where, guy runs fast, jumps high, and catches football. Like, we have all these visions of sugar plums in our head. And I don't know, every year we get swept up in this. There's nothing to it for the most part.
Totally agree.
Yeah. All right, that was our combine talk. We got a lot of really good questions though, so I want to make sure we give those enough time and attention. From Jesse Schott at Jesse Schott, what running backs other than the top 3 to 5 would you be willing to go after right now? Rocky, why don't you kick us off with this one?
For me, I actually don't want to go after the top 3 to 5 right now. If I'm going after running back, I think we kind of touched on this almost a little bit before we started. I want to try and get the older, cheaper and dynasty guys. Getting like an Aaron Jones or Alvin Kamara, guys who are going to be, you're going to be able to get for like a 2nd round pick and are still going to be productive for you. Those are generally the running backs I'm targeting in the off season. So yeah, I would not really be wanting to pay the price for any high end running back right now, unless I thought I was getting him at a discount. But I would, yep. Jesse's in the chat and says, yes, old cheap. It's his move this year. And especially, he's right though, this year especially, we're in a spot right now where there are so many, a lot of these free agents we're talking about are old and cheap in dynasty, like Eckler now, but after he didn't have quite as good of a year. Henry, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, all those kind of guys. So those are the kind of guys I'm generally targeting at running back. I don't want to pay up for the high end guys unless I just if I already have them. I'm not necessarily selling them, but I'm definitely not buying at this time of year.
How about you, Neil?
There's one name that jumps out to me, just based on situation, circumstance, and the skill set as well. That's James Cook. I just think that Cook, once Joe Brady ended the Ken Dorsey reign of terror in Buffalo, we saw James Cook become a huge focal point of the offense. Obviously, we know this team goes through Josh Allen. That's a given. We don't have to worry about that. But from week 11 onwards, when Joe Brady came in, we saw the Bills were number 1 in the NFL in total rush attempts. So this is a team that, since Josh Allen has been there, have passed the living piss out of the ball, but then they became the most run-heavy team in football. James Cook's role, he went from 8 rush attempts a game to 16.7. 72 rush yards from 43.2. He went from playing under 40% of the snaps to playing over 53% of them. He became a key part of an offense that I think we still have some degree of faith in because of the quarterback. Stephon Diggs may be a declining player, but he's still Stephon Diggs to an extent. He still carries some name value. And, I just think that James Cook, his value seems to be all over the place. If you look at some trades on, some dynasty trades that I've looked at, I've seen him go for a first round this year. I've seen him basically as a throw-in for some drafts. I've seen him part of some huge packages with both teams. It seemed like, okay, you all seem to be shipping good players here. Wonderful league that must be. But I just think that you want an established role, and it looks like he has that. So if you're not going to get Christian McCaffrey, because for some reason, people don't seem to want to give him away. It's strange. If you're not going to get that, then I think for someone like Cook, who's probably ranked inside the top 10 running backs probably, but not thought of as the guy, he's certainly someone that I would like to get.
I really like that call because I agree with you. From what I'm seeing, Cook is not going for a ton, and I think it's kind of undervalued for what he did last year. He even before he was getting more opportunities, he was still producing a lot of games, at least at an RB2 level. And then I was just looking now over those last from week 11 on, last 7 weeks, RB5 in points per game. From that point you were talking about. I think he's kind of a little under the radar, and some people just don't like him for whatever reason. So I think that's a really good call.
A couple guys that I look for this time of year are players with decent draft capital that haven't done anything yet. 3rd and 4th round, 2nd year running backs. The cheapest one that I'm seeing right now is Tank Bigsby, and probably deservedly so, right? Did not do anything but fumble and screw up, and just his EPA is ridiculously horrible. Some of the worst ever in NFL history. So is he somebody worth investing in at a 312 for a fringe wide receiver? That's what I'm doing. I'm moving into the profile, not necessarily the name. I don't care about the name. I care about the draft capital and the success rate. I've got about a 25% chance of getting a top 24 season out of that profile, even when they haven't hit yet. So going into the 2nd year, those are running backs that I really like to target. Kendre Miller, Roschon Johnson, they're a little tougher to get, so I'm not hunting for that right now. I'm also looking at a Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, Tyler Algier, players that managers are pretty apt to give up on this time of year that I can get on the back end of deals, or I can move a 7th wide receiver for somebody that I'm hoping to never start into a running back that I may start in week 5.
If Zach Moss goes to the Ravens, we all go straight to the strip club. I'm just saying that.
To your point about doing that, a guy like that last year would have been Kyren Williams.
Yeah.
Last off season, that would be a guy that did nothing year 1, and if you were trying to just get him as a throw, and that would have worked out really nicely for you.
Yeah, it's an evergreen thing. You can just do it every year. Find out whoever was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round and didn't do anything, and offer your 3rd round pick for him and see what happens. Because these running backs were going in the mid-2nd in a lot of leagues last year. The profile hasn't really changed. Not hitting in your first year as a running back is not a death knell like it is at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see. Alex Sorcy @_Sorcy. Have you seen teams moving around between picks 101 to 104, so that being a bracketed tier, or 104 to 107, a 2nd bracketed tier? It doesn't seem like many are willing to pay a premium to move into these ranges. Neil, what do you think about this question?
I've not seen much movement myself. It doesn't tend to be, at the moment, obviously things can change, it doesn't tend to be a draft class at the moment where people are killing themselves to get up to get players. There's obviously going to be certain people at certain positions, but this isn't a draft. It doesn't have the stud running back. You know, it's the best. The blue chip players are a tight end that we saw a few years ago. I was in one league where Kyle Pitts went 101 in the rookie draft. That manager, I think he's still in therapy. I could be forgiven. I might be missing that, but if, you know, thoughts and prayers to him if he is there. So I just think this might be one of those drafts that we're hoping that players get hyped up the closer we get to the NFL draft to help us in our draft, because it just seems to be, I don't want to say meh, because, you know, I'll look stupid when an absolute superstar emerges, but it just seems that fantasy managers are keeping their powder dry at the moment and are just waiting to see what happens.
Are you seeing any action in those tiers, Rocky?
I haven't been seeing much, no. I feel like, are you saying moving within those tiers or moving into those tiers? That I wasn't clear on which way he was asking there.
I think it's within the tiers. So the 101 to 104 to me, it seems like the quarterback / perceived elite wide receiver tier, right?
Yeah.
I could see that extending possibly to 105 or even 106. And then that second tier, the 104 to 107, is wide receivers that folks believe in with a quarterback and a tight end snuck somewhere in that range. That's how I feel about it. I can't imagine at this time of year wanting to move within those tiers aggressively and to pay a premium. If anything, I would be more inclined to move down within those different ranges. And finding a buyer at this point, it's tough to find believers because we don't have names attributed to these picks yet. I think when we get a little bit closer, or when ADP gets a little more settled pre-draft, you can probably act at that point. But right now, it's a lot of moving into next year's class or taking picks from next year's class and moving into this class and just trying to find accessibility to the draft as a whole that I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say is, like, on the other podcast I do, Trade Addicts, we talk about trades every week. And what I've been seeing more there, I think, is more people trading into there, maybe by sending a player or two or a player and a pick, something like that, to get into the tier. But I'm not seeing a lot of movement within them. And I feel like a lot of people, I'm not even seeing a lot of that, the getting into there. I feel like a lot of people don't feel like 1 through like 7 is a pretty solid group. Like 7, like you said, 1 to 4 is kind of its own tier, but 1 after 7, I think there's at least right now is kind of a perceived tier break. And it just seems to me like a lot of people don't want to move out of there yet. And maybe they're waiting for the draft and then maybe we'll consider it. I don't know. But it just seems like I'm not seeing a lot of that in my own leagues or in the Trade Addicts trades that we're talking about.
What do you need to accept a deal? Let's say you've got the 106, sort of in the middle of these two tiers. Someone offers you the 112 and X. What does that adder have to be to drop you down really well below that 107 tier break to where you can't assume somebody's going to jump in and really extend that to the 108 or the 109? What's it going to take in terms of an adder to move you all the way down to the 112, Neil?
It's a tough one because if I'm doing that, then it's probably, this draft, it seems to be that that late first, early second, that seems to be where we're getting a bulk of the running backs that people tend to not be sure about. So if I'm going down to get that range where I can take one of them, probably I would like a serviceable wide receiver in exchange, like someone who's, is not a superstar by any stretch. I don't think anyone's giving him up, even just to move up in first round of drafts. So someone, who's got a bit of, in a decent landing spot, but maybe isn't firing fully yet, or maybe, might be coming to the end of their prime. Because I think that, if I was to be offered a running back, well, I think I like to get younger at running back. So I'm thinking I can just wait, I don't want to be taking a running back because then I'm going down to a range when I'm probably going to be looking to take another one. So I don't really need to be overloading with that. That's just personally what I think. Can't think of any names off the top of my head, but obviously that would be helpful. But
yeah, Rocky, let's say I'm offering you an adder of Deontay Johnson, right? So 112 and Deontay Johnson to move into 106. Does that get it done for you?
It does not. I mean, I think Deontay Johnson is basically like a second round value at this point, and that wouldn't be enough for me. I don't think to move that many spots at this point. As much as I love Deontay Johnson, there's just too much uncertainty there in terms of the quarterback position. What's going to happen? Like, as much as a target hog he is, if those targets are coming from Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph, I'm not nearly as interested. So I kind of agree with Neil. I'm not really interested in doing it for running back. I'd rather do like what I said, what we talked about earlier. Rather than move around in the first to do that, I would rather just send a second for one of those older guys. So I'm kind of with Neil. At that position, from 112 to 106, you're not getting a legitimate quarterback, really. So it would probably have to be a wide receiver as well for me. And probably, if I'm doing that, it's probably going to be a guy I'm hoping is going to give me points this year. I don't know that I can't think of a name off the top of my head that I don't think is going to score for me, that I think would that would move me there to go from 106 to 112. I'd want something if I'm dropping out of the hope range of the 106 and what that could be. I think I'd rather get points rather than take on the 112 and more hope of a guy that hasn't really produced yet.
Yeah, fair enough. This leads right into the next question. Some guy named Andrew Hall at Andrew Hall FF.
Hate that
guy. He asks, "What rookies are you targeting in the second round?" Rocky, let's kick it back to you since you were talking about the second round there.
So I'm not totally deep enough into my rookie stuff to really give good names that I like want to stake my plant my flag on. I will say it would probably be running back though. I want to get into more watching some of these guys before I start giving specific names. But I know the wide receivers. There's so many good wide receivers that they're going to extend in the second round too, which I think is just going to leave like a plethora of usable running backs. As we were talking about, there's the free agents are going to take up a lot of these spots, but there's also a lot of spots out there that are going to need running backs. So, and I think some of these second round guys are going to be usable if they end up in the right spot. If somebody doesn't sign, if like Dallas doesn't sign a free agent and they draft a guy in the top guy in the late second or something like that, and they're going to have one or two guys is going to get a big value bump too, probably in the draft. Whoever goes to one of those plum spots, even though none of these guys are considered elite prospects, somebody's gonna land somewhere, and we're gonna love it. And that guy even might go in the second because there's just so many receivers. There's looking like 4 first round quarterbacks, maybe 5. So there's gonna be a lot of running back talent. Again, it's not elite prospect talent, or else they wouldn't be going in the second round. But you don't always need elite talent at running back. Situation, I think, matters more at running back more than any other position, probably.
Yeah. Neil, do you have any targets in the second round of rookie drafts?
Yeah, there's a couple of running backs who, again, I'm not fully into the weeds yet. I'm still waiting for experts to tell me about about these people rather than doing it myself, because that's usually a gateway to disaster. But 2 players in particular that I'm seeing that probably at the moment seem to be available in the second round at various points of it are Jalen Wright and Braylon Allen. I don't think either of them are superstars based on their production, but they've had good production in college. And most importantly, they've both had this year, they had more than 20 receptions, which generally is a good figure. I think if you've got not doubts, but if you're looking to tick a box or maybe break a tier, a running back with at least 20 receptions tends to be fairly good, especially Braylon Allen, who I believe played at Wisconsin, which he had 28 receptions, which might make him the most prolific Wisconsin receiving back in history. You'll have to check that number. Obviously, I may be exaggerating slightly, but they seem to be in like the nice sweet spot of the middle of the second round, at least, maybe dropping a bit further because of all the wide receivers that we've got. Obviously, as well, second round is when you might start thinking about investing in a tight end. Obviously, Brock Bowers is probably going to be gone by then. So maybe that's when you look at, Jatavian Sanders, if you weren't totally put off by the meh testing at the combine. Obviously, we go back to athletic testing with the tight ends. So it's where I'm going to look to try and get a running back, I think, this year. And they're two names that I have in mind personally.
It's funny you mention Allen. I just recently kind of started watching. So I like to watch like the film on guys, and Braylon Allen is one I actually just started watching today. And the thing that struck me about him is he seems good at a lot of things, but not great at anything. It's kind of, sort of exactly the kind of guy I was just talking about. If he ends up in the right landing spot, I think he's good enough that he could give you some really solid fantasy production. I don't think he's necessarily ever an elite running back, but he's exactly the kind of guy I'd be targeting in the second round.
If you don't want to watch film, a couple of dynasty analysts that I follow and I take their advice because I don't watch film. FF Mike Cash, FFRPG podcast, great film guy. Peter Howard at PA Howdy. The Dynasty Hootenanny's going on right now.
Yes,
that's J Mike. He's
Zach Reed.
So awesome. Yeah, and we had Zach on the Superflex Super Show a few weeks ago.
For the record, I just want to say, though, I watch film. I am nowhere near what most of these film watchers post on Twitter are. I just do it for my own. I just like to get eyes on these guys. But I am not an elite film watcher. I will say that.
It's good to have the context, though. Running backs that I'm targeting in the second round, it's anybody that in the NFL draft that's been drafted in the third or fourth round. I will always draft a third round running back over a second round wide receiver. I will always draft a second round running back over a first round wide receiver. I deduct a round in terms of evening the playing field with the cross positional valuation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find out where these running backs are sitting. And I'm going to try to have 3 or 4 late second rounders likely. And I don't care about situation. I know that running back, you have to be handed the ball, right? You don't necessarily earn your opportunities. You fall into them in a lot of cases just due to injury attrition. But just give me decent draft capital. And I think I'll win out more often than not because I know that I'm not a good film guy. And I don't think necessarily we are as a community very good at predicting these outcomes anyway. So let's just lean on the knowns. And that's NFL teams spending millions of dollars figuring this out for us. Hope that helps, Andrew, whoever you are. I had a DM as well, and I just want to throw this out there. It's a pretty theoretical question, but I want to hear your thoughts on this, Neil. The topic is uncertainty. How do you bake uncertainty into your dynasty rosters? How does position factor into this contract situation? I thought this was a really good topic just to discuss abstractly with the combine, with us being right on the eve of free agency, just the concept of uncertainty. So take that word and run with it however you will. Just tell me how you approach uncertainty on your dynasty rosters come March.
In Dynasty, I tend not to want it too much because, as I say, we have these players in theory for their entire career. I'd like to know where they are. I'd like to know what they are doing. I'd like to know how they factor in on their own offense. Obviously, with rookies, there is a whole host of uncertainty. But we start telling ourselves stories, especially once they start getting attached to, once we start getting mock drafts and we start thinking about where they're actually going to be for years to come and what NFL team that can help. I think uncertainty is something more that I use in redraft, especially when, as JJ Zachariason constantly talks about the ambiguous backfield theory. Mm-hmm. Uncertainty there, that's you're pretty much playing a game of I don't know the answer, but I know I want to be part of it. So whereas I think, uncertainty at running back isn't helping us in Dynasty. As you say, running back, the opportunities are pretty much I need to hand this ball off. There you go. It's on you. Uncertainty at wide receiver. We can have situations where, you think very highly of a player, but the NFL team that currently employs him have got him running wind sprints. Well, that doesn't help anyone. So if you're going to have uncertainty, I think it's probably best to have it early in the season and at running back at best. You don't really want it in any other position because running backs, chances are running backs are going to fall into fantasy points at some point. uncertain wide receivers can get, those zeros on the score sheet, they hurt a lot more.
With the uncertain, when I read this, I kind of looked at it as, and you were talking about sort of the uncertainty of what's going to happen over these next few months. And for me, I tend to be a little more conservative with that. As I said, like, say the Pittsburgh guys, Pickens, Deontay, they could have a big upswing depending on if somebody goes there. Or they could be just as bad as they are, low valued as they are now. I guess I can see going in on that if you think something's going to happen. But I tend to be more conservative, and I'm willing to pay the little bit extra when something does happen. I was going to say, like in Atlanta, it seems something will, but I don't even know if that's uncertainty. Like, there's so much smoke now that they're going to get some kind of quarterback. They've been linked to Cousins. They've been linked to Fields. So I don't even know if you can call that uncertainty anymore. If you're still getting a dip on Pitts or London, that kind of guy I might buy into. Just because it looks a little better there, and just because the profile is so good on those guys too. But overall, I think I tend to be more wait and see, and I worry. I do tend to worry about kind of buying in on a guy, even if you're getting a lower price, say like a Deontay, you're only paying a second. I still don't want to. I don't know if I want to pay a second for Deontay to struggle for another entire year with Mason Rudolph when I can pay that second for Alvin Kamara to score me a bunch of points next year.
Yeah, good point. I am loath to have any uncertainty at my quarterback position. And let's just preface this by saying there's probably 15 or 20 players in total at any position that don't have uncertainty in the non-point scoring season. It's the truly elite profiles. And then there's literally everyone else, right? There's to different degrees of uncertainty. But we're dealing with most fantasy assets in this uncertain space. But I don't want to have that at my quarterback position. I'm kind of the opposite of you, Rocky, where I want to feel really good about quarterback because that's a repeatable scoring position that holds value in Superflex leagues. Like, I want to be pretty rock solid in what I can expect from a value and production standpoint at quarterback. At wide receiver, I'm more willing to embrace uncertainty because it's such a touchdown dependent position, right? Like, you can chase targets and there's a lot of signal to that. You can chase things like first read, you can chase yards per route run, and you can get pretty close. But the thing that changes the wide receiver 30 from the wide receiver 13 is touchdowns traditionally year over year. So I don't try to be right. I just try to get a decent set of wide receivers and say, like, this is where I'm at. I'm not going to hold too many. Running back is the most uncertain position, and I don't really care. I don't care if a player loses value at running back. I didn't have them to gain or maintain value. I just want running backs because they score points and it's a war of attrition at the position. And like, I'll just get a bunch of starts out of whoever. Craig Reynolds, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Alvin Kamara, great. Tight end is another one where I don't want to have a lot of uncertainty, but you only find that in the really old profiles traditionally. However, there may be more certainty in these younger guys coming into this non-point scoring season. We've got a lot of really interesting tight ends this year that you can draft at tight end 6, 7, 8, who may finish as the tight end 1. So we may need to rethink that a little bit.
I just want to say I don't necessarily, maybe to you it would be uncertainty, but I don't really love uncertainty at the quarterback position either. The guys I tend to target are more guys that I feel pretty certain about in terms of what range they're going to score in, and they're just cheaper because for whatever reason they're older. Or I mentioned before, I don't always just go for the super cheap guys. Like, I like to go for undervalued guys like Jalen Hurts before year 3, from going in between year 2 and year 3. I can't say I saw him being runner up to MVP, but I definitely thought there was potential for huge growth there. And I was saying things like, of anybody, he had the most potential to have that kind of Lamar Jackson break fantasy football kind of year, because of the running, because he had room to grow as a passer and all that stuff. So he was a guy that I was getting a lot of, and again, even with him, there was some certainty there because you knew he was the starter, you knew he was going to run the ball, and that gives you fantasy points. So even though I go lower end compared to what you like to do, I wouldn't even say I embrace uncertainty. I just embrace cheapness.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I'm so quick to categorize your strategy, and clearly it works. It's just so different than mine. Sometimes I don't understand it.
I get you.
I think we should move on. Let's move to our Find Me a Trade segment. Rocky, do you have the drop for that from Mr. Har?
Oh yes, sorry. That would be if I can find it. I feel bad I don't have it already set up. Here we go.
Find me a trade.
There we go.
Awesome.
Okay, so you want to go the rundown, and I'll pull up on the screen the roster and run it down when we get to that point.
Man, that sounds great. Yeah, so this is a cool league, the Georgia Classic Cars League, that was submitted to us by Charles at El Chombo. Awesome handle. His team is Grand National. And in this league, it's a 14-team league, PPR, Superflex, 1.5 scoring for tight ends, so half point premium. And there's some big play bonuses as well. QBs that have a 5-point passing touchdown, 4, and a -1 for both interceptions and sacks. So a lot of penalties there. These are 25-person rosters, a start 10, so quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a super flex, and then 3 flex beyond that. So El Chombo, Grand National, Mr. Charles, he has the 101, the 114, the 201, the 301, the 303, the 312, the 401, and the 412. I'll kick it to you, Rocky. Let's hear this manager's thoughts.
Okay, he says that he picked up the orphan for a rebuild, is heading into his second season. Says if he's being generous, there are maybe 10 players out of 25 that are worth keeping. Managed to acquire those picks. Doesn't think he wants to draft 8 rookies, but love to hear your thoughts on trade targets and if you think I should go for Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'll run down his roster real quick as I pull it up on the screen here. And okay, so he has at quarterback Baker Mayfield, Anthony Richardson as the only potential starters. Also Zach Wilson, Malik Willis. Running back is kind of just the get all the backup guys and hope they either are worth flipping because he did finish 2-12 last year. He earned that 101. So I'm guessing that's where most of he's got a lot of backup running backs. Israel Abanikanda, Zach Evans, Pierre Strong, Zamir White, those kind of guys. Most of the other ones are not really significant, even to the level those guys just were. So at receiver, he has Puka, he has Jaden Reed, and not much else. Quentin Johnston, Sky Moore, Dontavian Wicks, who looked good last year, and a couple other lower end guys. And then at tight end, Goddard, Davis Allen from the Rams, Peyton Hendershot, Charlie Kolar. So that's his roster there. And I guess we can get into the trades. Do you want me to start? Who do we want to go first?
Kick us off, man.
Okay, so what I decided to do, I actually kind of stole this. You keep going to Trade Addicts this week, but I stole this from a trade that was done in a Trade Addicts week that we talked about this last week. Someone had tiered down from Puka, and gotten, I think they added a small pick and gotten Rashee Rice and Devin Achane in one of the Trade Addicts leagues. And I kind of did the same thing here. He's got, he needs a lot of help, as he says. So, by the way, I would go Caleb with the 101, especially in a 14-team league, because he did ask that at the end. Especially in a 14-team league, quarterbacks are even more valuable. To me, it's pretty easily Caleb in that scenario over Marvin Harrison, even though his wide receiver room is not great either. But so I like the idea of kind of Puka. I think is potentially. I love Puka, and I think he's going to be good. But he could be at peak value. He's tied to Stafford, who talk about uncertainty. There's injury uncertainty. There's retirement uncertainty. So we'll see what happens after Stafford is gone, which could be as soon as 2025. It's nice to be with McVay, but if they don't have a quarterback, that's not going to matter. So I feel like there's at least potential. This is peak Puka. And I like the idea that I saw in that Triadics trade of kind of tearing down to another young receiver that showed potential this year. He's another guy that really, we were talking about it with James Cook, but Rice over the last 6 or 7 games of the season was only 1 point behind Puka in points per game. So there's a lot of potential there. And so I'm trading Puka and the 201. And this is the one issue is it's to a team named Orphan One. So I assume they need to fill that. So you might have to wait a little bit on this one, Charlie. But once that gets filled, Puka and the 201 for Rice. And I wanted to get an add-on. So Dalton Kincaid. 2 young guys tied to elite, maybe the 2 best quarterbacks in the league. They're going to be there for a while. The quarterbacks and the wide receiver and tight end are. The guy that has Kincaid has McBride and Kmet too, so it might be easier for him to let a Kincaid go. And I guess the guy who will have Kincaid and Rice, but yeah. So I don't mind moving up Puka. I feel like you could maybe. I like Puka more than Rice, just obviously based off what we saw last year. But I feel like it could be a thing where you're not taking that much of a hit, but the value disparity is a lot bigger than the point disparity might be. So you get another young add-on, you keep the rebuild going, and hopefully with this draft, maybe you get a little more to go next year, and you're getting a little closer to contention. He still has 2 firsts, and he has some of those late flyers if he wants to make them. So that's what I was thinking.
Neil, what do you think of that deal?
No, that sounds logical. I say there is the risk that we've been hurt before by rookies who've come out of absolutely nowhere and look like they're set and forget for the next 10 years, and they never get close to that first year. And I'd love for Puka to be the next guy in Los Angeles for the long term, but maybe someone loves him more than you. If that's the case, then he would seem to be the most obvious option on that roster to cash in on. I mean, for myself, the big play award in this league got me thinking that, let's take some of those 3rd round picks. Personally, I'm not sure in this draft how much we want to be spending. As he says, he doesn't want to be may not want to be taking 8 rookies. Well, let's take some of those 3rd round picks, maybe some of the 4th, and let's get some wide receivers with high ADOTs who could be a big play waiting to happen, especially if one of them is a free agent, especially if Darnell Mooney, what if he lands on the Chiefs? Would you? I'd buy him for the 312 personally. He's not going to be a hog. Well, no one is in Kansas City. Travis Kelce's still there. Assuming he doesn't follow his brother into the mist of retirement. A 312 for Darnell Mooney attached to Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I'd take that. If you think the Tennessee Titans passing game is going to get a bit more exciting now they've got a modern thinking offensive coach, well, maybe Treylon Burks. Maybe he's another late 3rd round rookie pick. He probably went a lot higher a few years ago. So let's go for him. Big play if you want as a running back, because I say the running back room here isn't great. I think that a lot of people are going to overvalue all of the Packers wide receivers based on this year. Whereas I don't think they can all be as good as each other in the long term, especially when you consider they're going to have, they're still going to want to run the ball. That's still what, LaFleur likes to do. They've got the 2 talented tight ends as well. So why not flip Dontavian Wicks to the team that has DeAndre Swift? Now, Swift had a weird year in the sense that everyone thought he was going to come in and be the receiving weapon that the Eagles haven't had at running back since Westbrook. But what he actually turned out to be was pretty much he's a good runner. and he didn't really get much passing down work. Well, that shows now that he's come from a situation with the Lions where he was seen primarily as a passing down back. Now we've seen that he can function as a rusher. There's not a lot of tread in the tires, and he has big playability as a receiver and a rusher. So I don't think it's a huge disparity if you were to flip Swift for Wicks, because I don't think Wicks is ever going to be the guy on the Packers. Whereas if Swift lands somewhere like Minnesota, maybe he goes back to Philly, someone like that where we know he's going to have a significant role, that could seriously upgrade the running back room and help with those big play bonuses.
Yeah, absolutely. Darnell Mooney could land in probably half a dozen situations, and they would all be potentially significant in this league. I was looking at last year's high scorers. The wide receiver 20 was Rashid Shaheed. That's not somebody that I typically think of as a difference-making wide receiver. And so if you think that Mooney is going to go to the Chargers, or if he's going to go to the Cowboys or the Chiefs, I mean, there's plenty of places where that could really pay off in a significant way. So I really liked that deal. And then thinking about Swift, as you were mentioning the fact that he has shown in glimpses a profile of a receiving back as well as that of a rusher now. One player who did that before he put it all together was Josh Jacobs. First round pedigree, Swift has second round, so slightly less, but still significant, while finishing in both capacities. So it really does feel situational. He needs more opportunities in both, but I could certainly see him being a difference maker. I think you may need to add a little bit to Wicks to get to Swift, though. What's the most you would add to Wicks in order to get into Swift?
Again, I don't think we want to be going too high, because again, there's still the uncertainty that maybe Swift has had a career year, and that maybe if he doesn't go to Philly, the next coach doesn't unlock him. So again, we're probably looking at one of those some of those late picks. Because as I say, I think the other guy's wide receiver room is desolate. So yeah. I think that to get Swift, that guy, is going to have to look and think, of all the players I've got, that's probably the one I can do without the least. So if he needs a throw in, I can't imagine it being too expensive.
Any thoughts on that, Rocky?
Yeah, I don't have a particular name. I do agree with you, though, that I think you need to add to Wicks to get to Swift. I do think Wicks has gotten a little bit of hype here. I agree with Neil. I think almost all the Packers receivers are a little overhyped based off of last year. Mm-hmm. I would think you'd probably need to. And again, a name is escaping me, but maybe a player in the mid-second range at least to get to Swift. I would think that would be my guess. And maybe if you have a name that pops into your head in that range, I can tell you if I would do it. But I'm kind of blanking on a good name right now. But I think that's kind of what you're looking at.
Yeah, there's probably 30 names that you could throw in there that might do the trick. So it's just about asking around. When I was looking at this Find Me a Trade, again, I looked at the scoring settings as well. At tight end, that 1.5 PPR isn't super significant to me because of these big play bonuses. And so I almost treat this as if there isn't a tight end premium, unless you're going to have a tight end that is capable of, 30, 40, 50-yard touchdowns. And so I liked your Dalton Kincaid trade for because I think he is one of the very few tight ends that has that in his range of outcomes as really big plays. The other thing I looked at was quarterback. So having these penalties for sacks and for interceptions is really significant to me. Having a rookie quarterback, regardless of how talented they are, is not a reliable asset if you're getting -1 point per sack, as well as 1 point for interception. So if you draft Caleb Williams, just understand that this is probably a 2025 undertaking, right? So a couple quarterbacks that you could target that I couldn't find a deal. Dak Prescott, QB6, Kirk Cousins, QB5 in this format. I think they could both be had. I just didn't see the right deal for you. And so what I'm looking at is working with Aston Martin. I want to treat this team almost like a best ball team where I'm just pursuing really high outcomes. And so in order to solidify that running back position, as well as to put more upside at the wide receiver position, I am proposing that you get Devon Achane and Christian Watson from Aston Martin, and you give up Baker Mayfield and the 114. The reason I'm giving up Baker is his sacks and interceptions do not support this scoring setting. You'd rather have a Jared Goff than a Baker Mayfield, right? And so he's somebody that I could get rid of pretty easily. He only scores about 14 points per game in this setting, and Achane scores like 17 or 18. So he is more worthy of sitting in a super flex spot than a Baker Mayfield. So I'm willing to get rid of him. And then the 114 is really the sweetener. I know we like first round picks, anything with a 1 at the front, but this is really a second round pick, right?
Yep.
Looking at Christian Watson, he was putting up 30 and 40 points at his peak games in his rookie year in this setting. And so if Rashid Shaheed can be the wide receiver 20, I think we can probably get some real ceiling outcomes with a Christian Watson. He's got the draft capital, and we've seen it in limited glimpses. It's just a matter of if he can stay healthy and on the field, and if the chemistry builds with Jordan Love. What do you think of my deal?
Yeah, I like, especially the Achane part.
Yeah.
Like you said, he is. I'm a huge Achane guy now. I know it's funny because it's so funny. Like some of the guys I'm the biggest fans of, I did not like at all coming into the league. And Achane was a guy in the draft process last year I was not super high on, and then once they changed my mind, they change it big time a lot of the time. So, but I'm a big Achane guy. He doesn't need a lot of touches to produce, and that's because he's explosive. And that's exactly what you want in this league, like you were saying. You know, like you said, I think Achane is more valuable than Mayfield. That 114 / if you want to call it a 202 in a 12-team league is probably more valuable than Watson, but I think it kind of evens out on both sides. So I think the value is good. And like you said, Watson is another guy, if he can ever stay healthy and put it all together, is a guy you expect big plays from. That's what we saw in college. So it really fits the system, the scoring system here. I guess I was going to say, I'm not even sure, like, do I want to buy a running back for this team? Because it is a little rough right now. But
Yep.
You can a lot of times turn these things around quicker than you think. And HN is only going into his second year. You would hope maybe by, if not next year, by 25, you're starting to turn it around. So HN's, I'm sure, got many more years in the league. He's a smaller guy, but he's also not going to kind of have the volume of a lot of these other guys. So I expect he could hang around a while into your actual contention phase. You know, even if that takes till 25, 26, he could still be relevant. Or you could sell him off in the meantime. If, say Mostert goes down next year, he is getting tons of volume. You sell him for even more than you paid for him. So, yeah, I like that a lot. I think it fits the settings, and I think the value is good. So, yeah, I think it's a good trade.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, the other thing, too, is if you're only playing the value game, we're assuming Baker is coming back to Tampa Bay. As of this recording, that hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
And so you're pushing a little risk away. The other thing is, come into the season, running backs are injured more frequently than quarterbacks, right? That's just a fact.
Yes.
If you can move in this setting into a high leverage running back, I think your trade market's going to be more robust as well. So you don't even need to take the points all year. You can trade him away going right into like week 2, week 3 as these injuries start to mount.
I think it's a good point too. I think even in a 14-teamer, I think, and even after what he did last season, I think a lot of people are still not really all that into Baker. I think there's, which could be a problem trading him to Aston Martin, but assuming you can do that, I think there's going to be more limited market for Baker, even in a 14-team superflex, than there would be for HN.
Yeah, and Aston Martin doesn't have essentially any quarterbacks
Yeah,
while
so it works.
staying in a contending window. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think there's something there. And really what you're doing is you're doubling down your bet on Caleb Williams at that point. So I would be inclined to maybe look towards a Dak plus if I could with that 101. I think you can get a pretty good plus because they're infected with the rookie fever right now, and Dak is 30 years old, so there's no way he can be good.
Exactly.
But that's all I had. Hey Neil, we got you back. How you doing, man?
Apologies, technology doesn't agree with me.
No worries. We just went over my trade. Do you have any thoughts on giving up Baker in the 114, getting Devon Achane and Christian Watson?
No, as I say, we know this is a league that rewards big plays. Christian Watson, again, it's that whole overrated Packers receivers, everything, but he's the big play element of that. And if we accept that Jordan Love is the guy, then we want him tethered to him. So Achane, as we know, is a big play every time he touches the ball. So I don't think it's a terrible idea to get more speed and get the big play threat in. So I think they were good picks for what I would say. What you're giving up is not extortionate, I don't think. So, no, I like that trade. Probably like it more than mine.
Well, I hope that helped you out, El Chombo. It was an interesting league, interesting format, so I appreciate you submitting that. If the listeners want to submit their own league, we've got that pinned to the Dynasty Junkies Twitter page.
Yep.
We would love to find you a trade, but you have to submit one to us. That's the end of our show sheet, though. Neil, I want to thank you and give you a moment to plug your work again, because it is really good work, and I just really appreciate you joining us today.
No, it's a genuine pleasure to be asked. I say, but a lot of people don't like to speak to me. They hear the voice and go, "Oh no, we don't want to do that." But no, you can find my work. I say at Rotoviz. You can find it at Player Profile. You can find it at 4for4 Football. If you're in the UK, you can find it at Gridiron Magazine, and you can follow me on the Twitter machine at Endutton13.
Awesome. We appreciate you coming on. Please follow the show at Dynasty Junkies. Follow Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict. And if you'd like, follow me at FF Tommy B. But that's all we got for you today. Dynasty Junkies out. Thanks, y'all.